Okay, here we go. We've got our colours assigned, so we continue through that process. So at this point, I'm just going to go File, Save As, and call this Materials, just so I know my material stage is covered. I can go back to this stage if I want to. So at the moment, what we've got is all these separate meshes with their colours attached. What we need to do now before we bake out our ID map is actually separately UV unwrap these sections. So sometimes you can trust an automated method to UV unwrap each section. What I prefer to do is go in and treat each one separately. So let's just go through some basic principles on a couple of these sections, and then you can apply it to the rest. So this, for example, is in essence a cylinder. So to unwrap a cylinder, we know that we need to basically cut the caps off each end and then have a seam that runs down its length to lay it out flat. So let's go into edit mode and we pick edge mode. And I'm going to select this top edge loop. So to do that, this here, look. Make sure we're all deselected. I'm going to keep my finger on Alt key and I'm going to click on one of these edges that make up this top cap loop. So it selects the whole loop. And I'm going to go Control E for edges and mark this as a seam where we're going to make a cut. And it goes red, look. Okay, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to try and get this here. So Alt click to get that whole loop, Control E to mark seam and pick mark seam. So we've cut the caps off basically if we were cutting this out. So all that's left to do is to cut a seam, and we want to hide this where we think the model is going to be seen the less. So if we know that in our shot or our film or whatever, that the model is going to be seen mainly from, say, this angle and all the way around to here, but not over here, we could hide our seam in this back edge. So I'm going to Alt click on this long seam going down here and make sure that that seam reaches the top cap, which it does where I've made the other cut, and it comes all the way down to the other cut. So we've got a continuous cut as if we were using some scissors and cutting up the edge of this tube. Control E to mark seam and mark seam. So basically we've put all our cuts in. So now if we press A and then once again A to select all the mesh, then press U for unwrapping or UV mapping, and we're just going to do the manual unwrap. And what you can see is you can see our two caps that have been cut off and then our things splayed out here. So to see how good this is mapped, what we can do now is load in a test grid. Now this isn't going to be something we render out, but it's going to allow us to test and ascertain how good our UV unwrap is. So where it says new at the bottom in this UV window, now if you haven't already opened this UV window, then you come down to this section at the bottom, the editor type, and we can pick UV editor from the options. So now we can see the UV unwrap as we're doing it up here. And we're going to load a temporary image in here by pressing new. I'm going to pick UV grid as the generation type, so not blank, but UV grid. Press OK. And that's loaded that UV grid in behind our UVs, but we can't see them here. And the reason for that is that we haven't ticked textured solid. So make sure you come over here and tick textured solid. And we can now see those squares, if we press A to deselect, being mapped onto our... And what we're looking for is that they're all consistent in size and they're all consistently square, so there's no stretching and warping. And for the most part, that is working really quite well. We've got a little bit of pinching here as the mesh kind of scales in toward this cap. I mean, to alleviate that, we could put one more cut down to this point here. So if we wanted to splay this out even more, so let's see that result. It does mean adding another cut, but let's take, say for example, we're going to cut to splay this out even more, say here. So let's think about, again, our side that's not going to be seen so much. And let's take it from this point where it starts to warp and change. Let's keep our finger and shift and press on all. As if we were butterflying a chicken. Let's go and cut and Control E, mark seam. Select all and just see what this does when we press U for unwrap and unwrap it. You see what it's done? It's splayed that out at that point and taken some of the pressure out of that section, but not all. So it doesn't always work. I think it's forgiving enough if we go back to how we were. As minimal seams as possible to get something that's mapped fairly accurately there. Okay, so that's one section done. That's a cylinder type object. And we've got lots of cylinders in here, to be honest. So we can carry on with this same idea and this same approach. So we're trying to hide our seams either in recesses or where areas where they won't be seen. Okay, so let's try one more here. Tab into edit mode. A to deselect everything. And then what we can do is do the same thing. We can come to where we could match the line that we want to take down the length of it. Alt click. And there's that edge loop and it takes you down to that circle. We can also keep our finger on shift and alt click to take another loop. So selecting them all at once and come up to this top edge loop. Keep your finger on shift and then alt and click on this top line. Then we simply go Control E, mark seams, so they've all been marked at once. Select all with A, U for UV unwrap and press unwrap. And then we've unwrapped that section now. And because we've got this already in there, you can see that that is mapped really successfully to our model and our seam is consistent all the way down. You'll notice that there's a scale difference between our two UVs, but once we combine all these meshes together into one UV atlas, then we'll equalize the scale between them. Okay, so that's how we go. We need to continue on through each section, thinking about where we want our seams and how we're going to uncut it until we get something that's mapped accurately in this way. So we've UV unwrapped an object or two. We've then seen them in our UV window below here. We've loaded a test grid in behind those UVs, so then we can see how well we've UV unwrapped this. And then we've used the textured solid option so we can preview this UV grid on top of our mesh. Importantly though, if we were to untick this, it returns back to those materials that we've allocated. So I'll continue on whilst you have a go as well. And when we come back, we'll look at ways in which we combine all these UVs all together. Thank you.